On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we look at the state of the U.S. Navy's surface force, see soldiers use a new handgun, get the latest on the 2019 defense budget, and learn about some hidden heroes. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. Government funding will run out in less than 2 weeks. Just before Christmas, lawmakers punted on passing a 2018 spending bill, setting a deadline for January 19th. But there are many issues still to be decided, including a government surveillance program, a possible border wall, and looming budget caps. With lawmakers coming up on this critical deadline, be sure to visit defensenews.com for the latest on a possible deal. Bids for the U.S. Navy's unmanned tanker program are due this week. The program, known as the MQ-25, will be the first unmanned production aircraft to operate off of a U.S. carrier and will replace modified F-18 Super Hornets in the role. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and General Atomics have said they will compete. The Navy expects to buy 72 of the winning aircraft, which must be able to deliver 15,000 pounds of fuel more than 500 miles away from the carrier. To see and read more about the program, be sure to visit defensenews.com. The head of Israel Aerospace Industries has announced that he will step down after 6 years in the job. Joseph Weiss took over IAI in 2012 and, according to the company, has helped them increase their order backlog to more than $11 billion. His tenure has also been controversial, notably when he was denied entry to the United States by the Trump administration. No reason was given for the denial. In a statement, Weiss said that he is confident that IAI will continue to grow. The fiscal year 2019 defense budget could be released on time, but it may not be as big as expected. In a recent gaggle at the Pentagon, Deputy Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan told reporters that while the 2019 budget will be a step up, 2020's budget will be the, quote, masterpiece. He also said that the 2020 budget will be driven by the ongoing nuclear posture review and ballistic missile defense review. While the Deputy Secretary said he couldn't say much about the 2020 budget, he did say that the technology being considered was, quote, really cool. Nigeria says a delayed deal for light attack aircraft has been finalized. The deal provides 12 A-29 Super Tucano aircraft, along with rockets and bombs. The deal is worth nearly $600 million. The aircraft are made by Brazilian company Embraer, but they have a production line in Jacksonville, Florida, in partnership with Sierra Nevada. The aircraft are also operated by the Afghan Air Force. 5 of the Air Force's 16 operational E-8C JSTARS surveillance aircraft were damaged recently when an engine failed and injured 4 airmen at Warner Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. Since the December 21st incident, 4 of the aircraft are believed to be back in service. The Air Force says there was no damage to the expensive radars underneath the aircraft, and there was no disruption to the aircraft's availability. The Air Force is in the process of deciding whether to buy a new JSTARS aircraft or distribute the mission across multiple platforms. Turkish officials say they and Russia have finalized a deal to acquire an S-400 air and missile defense system with an option for a second system later on. The deal has caused lots of controversy, as NATO officials say the S-400 is not compatible with NATO systems, particularly the F-35, of which Turkey is a major partner. While NATO officials haven't laid out specific consequences for Turkey if they do field the S-400, they have said it will not be interoperable with NATO systems throughout Europe and the Middle East. Turkey says it expects to field the system in 2020. Japan and South Korea are reportedly considering plans to operate the vertical landing version of the F-35 operated by the U.S. Marine Corps aboard helicopter carriers. Both nations have ships large enough, but they would need modifications like a thermal protective coating and increased storage for weapons. But for Japan, there's also another issue, since the country's constitution bans Japan from having, quote, war potential. Both countries are set to get the conventional variant of the F-35, but not the vertical landing model. Soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky are now equipped with the Army's new handgun, the M17, made by SIG Sauer. Ground combat reporter Todd South paid this storied unit a visit to find out how they're adjusting to the new weapon.
The M17 is a 9mm handgun. It's the first new sidearm for the Army since the Beretta M9 in 1986. It's arrived here at the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It's a modular handgun system, part of increasing lethality of small arms for the soldier.
So we're going from having 9 M9s in our company to 46 of these weapons. And so that's giving us the capability to issue those out to like team leaders and above. It just improves our lethality as a force as a whole, just having more soldiers armed with this weapon.
SIG Sauer won the 10-year, $580 million contract in 2017 and is scheduled to produce 195,000 pistols for the Army. It's got an interchangeable grip module that can be adjusted to size and will include hollow point bullets for issue on operations, which is a first for the regular Army.
Oh, big differences. I know the M9, we previously had, it was double action, so a lot of guys were hesitant within that first trigger squeeze. They kind of squeezed it down. So a lot of guys were hesitant with that, and then once it goes off, then they're just rocking right into it. But with the new one, it's just it's real simple. It's real dumbed down for these guys, and it's easy. It's a lot easier, and it has a lot of different more capabilities.
A boon to soldiers will be a more reliable weapon going to more members of the platoon. The weapon itself can be configured to use suppressors, have extended magazines, and have other tools mounted on it, much like an assault rifle.
With mounting a laser on it, it's like now we can actually incorporate these into more of a night ops. Now, we've never been able to do that before with the previous M9. So that's another really cool thing, and just one more thing that we can train guys on now doing. That just throw it in the bag that we can use pistols at night now.
It gives us more confidence in the fight, just knowing that in the event that that primary weapon system does go down, we have a reliable backup that's going to take care of us, out there wherever we may be.
The Navy's surface force was front and center in the 2017 news cycle after 2 collisions in the Pacific left 17 sailors dead. Investigations into the 2 collisions revealed serious problems within the Japan-based 7th Fleet. So in order to get a handle on the state of the surface force, I sat down with naval warfare reporter David Larder. So Dave, you just returned from embarking on the USS Mobile Bay, a Ticonderoga class cruiser. What was it like? What did you learn?
Well, it was a great experience, great hospitality. I will say that the ship is getting to the end of its 35-year service life. It is in great condition for a 30-year-old ship, but things are starting to go wrong, as with any sort of classic car. The longer it's on the road, the more time you're going to have to put in the garage, and that's just the case with these older cruisers. They need a lot of tender loving care, so the crew spends a lot of their time putting love into it, as they put it.
And so what does that entail? Is it just maintaining systems that are older?
Sure. So, for example, the Spy-1 Alpha radar is, it's 70s, 80s technology, and they have these giant vacuum tubes in the big rooms with lots of support equipment for this radar that anymore would be done on blade servers and, a lot smaller equipment, miniaturization and what have you. So those guys work really hard to keep up some old equipment, to keep Spy radar up and humming. Still a great radar with lots of range and capability. Mm-hmm. It's just old, and they struggle with obsolete parts, so they're horse trading all the time to figure out if they can get parts from another ship or from the junkyard, or I guess they call it the Ghost Fleet in the Navy. But they are constantly struggling to keep things up and moving, and for example, down in the engine room and the sort of the hull mechanics and technicians, they're having a lot of trouble with pipes that have had chill water or salt water or wastewater moving through them for 30 years now, are starting to thin out, get a little bit leaky from time to time, and they spend a lot of time fixing that. So that's just the case with older ships.
So beyond that, it kind of leads into this larger issue. You also did an interview with the Commander of Naval Surface Forces. What did you learn from that interview about these issues that are facing the surface force?
So as with any facet of the U.S. military, they are making decisions with what to do with their money. The cost of modernizing these cruisers, that would be replacing lots of old pipes and fixing tanks and fixing wiring and putting in new computers. All that costs, on some of the newer cruisers that they've modernized, that has cost in excess of $350 million, and that's a whole littoral combat ship. So
wow.
It's expensive. So they're trying to figure out what to do with that. There seems to be a universally held opinion in the Navy that they really want to keep the old cruisers. And Admiral Roden is there as well. But they're also looking to spend money to make the ships that they have more lethal and more more of a problem for a potential adversary. We have a lot of ships that have a lot of functionality that can tote Marines and equipment around, but aren't very scary to an adversary. And so
one of those is the Anchorage. What did you learn about the exercise with the Anchorage, and what was that for those that don't know?
So the amphibious transport dock Anchorage was strapped with a long-range artillery, a rocket, long-range rocket system called HIMARS, which is the Marine Corps weapons system, and they demonstrated that you could integrate it to some extent on Anchorage and strike at land targets from in excess of 50 miles, or in excess of 45 miles, what I should say. And so that was a big coup for what Admiral Roden is trying to do in terms of his, what he calls distributed lethality, make more ships more scary and more deadly so that the adversary doesn't just have to think about going after the cruisers and the destroyers. They can have to start worrying about, well, what if the USS Anchorage gets a little too close? We have to worry about that as well. So you're diverting assets is the idea. So that's another thing they're trying to spend money on, and that's what they're sort of chipping away at Naval Surface Force Pacific.
Another thing that obviously had to come up was two collisions this year. You've done a lot of reporting on that. What did the Admiral tell you about what's being done to recover from those incidents?
So I think obviously the comprehensive review came out with that Admiral Phil Davidson at Fleet Forces Command led up, and that had 58 items in it, and for anything from clearing up lines of authority to really getting at some of the cultural sickness that kind of set in with years of cuts and efficiencies and trying to find the right balance between getting the job done and making use of resources which can become constrained when we're invading Iraq or and not with cruisers and destroyers, and or if we're if we're have across the board budget cuts like the Budget Control Act mandates. A lot of efficiencies have turned into things that have started to impact training and professionalism and proper manning. And so those are the things they're trying to get at and really sort of fix this culture of good enough. I think that's what they're most concerned about, is fixing a culture of just get the job done no matter what. Really trying to get at, okay, how do we do this right and professionally and well? And for that's going to really take some effort to change the culture. And changing a culture of a big organization like the Navy is very difficult. So that's what he's trying to get after.
All right, David, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple News and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we introduce you to some hidden heroes and see how the classics are helping veterans.
Today's program is provided in part by Raytheon, proud partner of FifthDomain.com, the sister site of Defense News, dedicated to all things cyber. Learn more at FifthDomain.com.
A couple of professors at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, began a podcast to discuss historical and fictional leaders. Marine veteran Brian Wilson records the podcast and distributes it to military and veteran audiences. Military Times reporter Natalie Gross visited St. John's to get a first-hand look how the show is produced and find out the motivation behind it.
About once a month, St. John's College professor Jeff Black hunkers down in an Annapolis, Maryland basement for a remote chat with fellow academics about classical literature.
Military students and ex-military students made very good students at St. John's, and so I was interested in figuring out some way that we could get more of these students to enroll at the college. So what we finally decided was a lot of people have some time when they're driving onto base or going home after the end of their day, and they'd like to listen to podcasts.
The Combat and Classics podcast is part of the Partially Examined Life series and has been downloaded nearly 12,000 times to date.
We know that service members are serious people and they've had experiences that lead them to confront fundamental questions. The whole goal is to provide a kind of introduction that encourages people to want to read the books on their own and also encourages them to find other like-minded people who might want to talk about these sorts of things with them.
You can find Combat and Classics on Apple Podcasts or the podcasting app of your choice, or visit the podcast website at combatandclassics.org for more information. Reporting from Annapolis, Maryland, Natalie Gross, Military Times.
When a service member is wounded, the recovery can take years, and that can also take a toll on the service member's family. So the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is working to help those families in a program called Hidden Heroes.
I had just fallen asleep. It was probably about 11:30 or close to midnight, and the phone rang, and I could tell in his voice that something was terribly wrong.
We were congregated kind of in a half-moon formation outside the building, and at that moment a car drove up.
He was extremely raspy. He could hardly speak. And I immediately started crying, and I was really upset.
He opened fire on us. He shot me first, and he shot my friend Nate shortly thereafter, and then another officer was shot. I woke up, I think, 18 or 19 hours later in Bagram. My leg was amputated, and at that moment I called my wife.
I have no medical training whatsoever, and so now I have a husband with a newly amputated leg, a grocery bag of medicine, a 2- and 4-year-old, and basically a barracks apartment, and you're on your own.
About 6 years ago, my husband Bob was hospitalized at Walter Reed for 11 months. And of course, I got to know so many of the young spouses, the mothers, the dads who were caring for our wounded, ill, and injured veterans. And of course, I was learning more and more about what they were dealing with and the concerns, the fears they had. Their lives had suddenly been changed, and how were they going to manage once they left the hospital? And then I followed them after they were released from the hospital, and learned that they were in isolation. They felt so alone. We call them hidden heroes because, you know, they just really had no support. So all of this really led me to establish my foundation. The stress is incredible. What you think about, you know, caregiving is very stressful on your physical and emotional well-being, on your financial resources, on your social relationships, and they're suddenly engulfed in these major issues dealing with the most severe wounds, illnesses, and injuries. Obviously, what we're trying to do is to be there for them at every turn.
Everyone knows what to do when there's a death within the military because we're familiar with that situation, unfortunately. But we're not familiar with injury, and not that it doesn't happen, but what happens when you are injured is that you're separated. And so what to do next isn't there.
And that's where the heroic effort has been, because she's seen me at my darkest, you know, and she's seen me when you start to lose hope that you can even move on. And she's never pitied me. She's always, she might have empathized with me a little bit about like, hey, I understand you're in a tough spot. But it was never pity. It was always, no. Reframe that question. Do it this way, do it that way. Push yourself forward. And that's been the heroic thing that I've seen from the Hidden Heroes.
Don't go away. When we come back, find out tips on buying a car, learn a possible life-saving skill, and see how one veteran is getting the lives of others on track. On this week's Money Minute, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers her tips on buying a car.
If it's time for you to buy a new or used car, keeping your excitement and your budget in check is vital to a successful mission. To keep yourself from getting into more car than you can afford takes a bit of budgeting, some research, and a great lender. Start with a quick credit check. Know where you stand before you even start to look at cars. If your credit score could use some TLC, take the time to bring it up. This will help you get the rate and payment that fits your budget. And speaking of budgets, check your income and expenses to know what payment works safely for you. Now you can start your research. Think about how much you drive and where to match the car to your lifestyle. And while new models are attractive, the used car market may also be ripe with off-lease cars. They're usually in great condition since leases have strict wear and tear rules. Next is financing. Work with your bank or credit union to get a good pre-approval before you visit the dealer. That way you'll have the purchasing power of a cash buyer. With a check in hand, you're ready to hit the dealership, negotiate like a boss, and hit the road with confidence.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. And when we come back, see how one veteran is succeeding after leaving the service. Some nonprofit organizations are designed to help homeless veterans find a job and a place to live. That's great, but without some support after securing a place to live, many veterans wind up back on the street. So one retired Marine made it his mission to get those vets on track.
In simple terms, we help turn houses into homes. We furnish homes for veterans and first responders who have just been placed into permanent housing from living on the streets. We provide everything from kitchen utensils to rugs on the floor to furniture to
Let me go backwards.
paintings and wall decor. Whatever it takes to turn those four-bearer walls into a warm, loving home, that's what we do.
I didn't expect this much furniture. Really, it surprised me when they came with all of this and this nice entertainment center. Blew my mind.
When we meet these veterans, the first thing that occurs to me is that could be me. And if it were me, how would I feel? What would I need?
The very first veteran that we serviced was in July of 2016. When we walked into his apartment, we were astounded. The only thing this vet had in his one-bedroom apartment was a blanket.
It needs to happen more often, especially in Northern Virginia where it's so expensive. People have to decide between paying for daycare or buying stuff like this.
I don't know how we couldn't help him, especially knowing he's made sacrifices to put himself in a position to be present as a father. Because the only thing he wanted was to be there for his daughter. He moved, he relocated, he ended up being homeless for a while because of that choice. He made a huge sacrifice. Our sacrifice is easy. It's a little bit of time, it's a little bit of legwork. How can we find a thing to help him be the father that he really wants to be for his daughter?
Financially, it means that I have money to do activities with my daughter. I could save money, take her to the circus, do some things that kids like to do.
Giving him a sense of self-worth so he doesn't have to come home where he's worked 13 hours to a blanket or maybe just a mattress on the floor. And so now he's put all that time in, but he's only making just enough money to cover the rent and some food, and he's going to continue struggling and feel less because he can't provide even the most basic things for himself or his daughter. Providing that value, giving them that step up, raising their base just a little bit so that he feels better. He sits up taller, he walks a little taller, he can smile at his daughter. I don't know how much more value you can get out of a thing than that.
You never know when you might need to open a garage door without an opener, but as retired Navy SEAL Clint Emerson explains, it could save your life.
100 Deadly Skills, book number 1, skill number 53, defeat a garage door opener. I'm going to show you how to do it, then I'm going to show you how to counter it. Let's get started. So for the purposes of defeating the garage door, we're using a locksmith tool, but a hanger will work just as well as shown in 100 Deadly Skills. The goal is to hook the garage release cable. And we're going to do that by sliding this tool in between the top of the door and the door frame. Let's get started. I'm going to find center, and I want to go just left or right of center. We're going to guide it up in here. Once it's in, now we're going to start fishing. And then once you think you've got it, and you pull. And we're in. All right, so you just saw how easy it was to defeat your garage door. You're sending in this basic locksmithing tool, or a hanger will do just fine, and you're sliding it between the top of the garage frame and the door, and then you're trying to hook the release cable, pull it through, release it, and now you're in. So now the counter and the defeat for that is really simple. You go up here and you cut the cable, okay? Now you've just made your garage safe. That's skill number 53, 100 Deadly Skills, book number 1.
That's all we have time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to head over to defensenews.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.